What's up guys, edrone here, and today we're going to be installing the DalRc Engine Pro 4-in-1 ESC on my Reverb build. Stay tuned. Alright, so in the last video we installed the motors and got all that secure. I'm going to go ahead and put a link up here for that video. And we got the motors all installed. Now we are ready to go ahead and install our DalRc Engine Pro ESC. Now, typically, I've been going with individual ESCs on the arms, and this build I wanted to do something different. My good buddy Josh Withrow, check him out, his channel I'll put right up here. He's been trying to talk me into going to 4-in-1 ESCs for a while now, and I've just kind of always been hesitant, like, I don't know, if one of them goes up, you got to replace the whole thing, and I'd rather just replace one ESC versus the whole thing. But, he's told me that 4-in-1 ESCs are a lot more reliable nowadays than they used to be when they first came out. So I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and give it a go. I really like the way this DalRc engine looks. It just looks so cool. Let's go ahead and take it out of the box here. You can see it actually looks like an engine, like the top of a engine in a car. And this is actually functional as well as visually stimulating. Taking a look up close at the Dal Engine Pro 40 amp ESC. This can take 3 to 5S. Super clean looking. Here's all your soldering pads, nice and large, good size. Here's your battery pads here for your main battery power on the back side. And we flip this over, you'll see we have all the ESC electronics underneath. And man, I am really excited about this. I am excited. I think it's going to be a lot easier to wire up, get hooked up, and get this on this build. Now, in the package with the DalRc Engine 4-in-1, we also get some nice rubber standoffs here to help with vibrations. We also get our wires to wire this up directly to the flight controller, and they give us a nice Rubicon 560 microfarad 35 volt capacitor, which we're going to be installing on here as well. Now the good thing is we can actually install this capacitor right through these two holes. You see there's two holes right here. We can stick the capacitor leads through those holes and go ahead and solder it up and have this mounted on the 4-in-1 ESC. So it's nice that they include the Rubicon microfarad capacitor with the DalRc Engine Pro. And you get these nice soft mounts. What's going to make this build even easier is you see this plug header here on top. Actually, the flight controller I'm using is the DalRc F4 all-in-one, and it actually has pins that are going to plug directly into here. So if we want to, we can actually just plug the flight controller right into this engine and have a nice, clean, neat stack. We could also hook it up with wires and solder if we choose to, but I think it's going to be a lot easier to just use these pins. First thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and get our rubber standoffs so we can go ahead and get this guy mounted up where it's going to be on the build, so we can go ahead and pre-tin all these pads. So we're going to go ahead and get all these pads pre-tinned with solder. That way when we put this on the frame, it's ready to go ahead and solder up the wires and get this thing all connected. Now, for the positive and negative of the XT60, you're definitely going to need some nice high heat. Those are some very large pads. We're also going to be soldering up the Rubicon 360 microfarad capacitor as well onto the positive and negative pads. Now, if you don't know anything about capacitors, let me tell you, they make a huge difference. So if you look at the capacitor itself, you'll actually see that there is a shorter wire and a longer wire. Now, if you look at the capacitor, the shorter wire is always going to be your negative, and the longer wire is always going to be your positive. And you can see there's a little negative sign. Now, in order to go ahead and mount and use the DalRc little rubber standoffs, we had to make a little modification to the Reverb frame. So what I did was I removed the 12 millimeter pan head screw that originally came with the frame, because as you can see, there's not a lot of thread sticking up at all. And I went ahead and replaced it with a 20 millimeter hex head screw from my Race Day Quads kit. I'll put a link down in the description for this kit. Man, it has this come in handy on several occasions. So once we go ahead and swap the 12 millimeter out for the 20, now once we put our soft mounted 4-in-1 DalRc engine down, now you can see there's just enough threads to go ahead and get the next stack on top. We have the capacitor through the positive and negative, making sure that we get this on the correct polarity. And we'll go ahead and add the solder, which will kind of help secure this down. And then we'll go ahead and add our XT60 connector and pre-tin the rest of these pads. All right, starting out with the larger XT60 pads, positive and negative. You want to crank your soldering iron up pretty high. These pads are very demanding. They take a lot of heat and a lot of solder. So go ahead and just heat those up real good and get you a nice shiny big old ball of solder on there. And that'll be real good when you go to add your XT60 wire. Here you can see we are adding quite a bit of solder until just about all the pads covered up. And you want to make sure it's nice and shiny. We definitely have the capacitor nice and secure, so it's not going anywhere. Now it's time to go ahead and get the XT60 ready. I've already pre-tinned the wires. This one I had to turn the soldering iron all the way up. Probably should have used a bigger surface area tip. You have a larger solder joint like this, you want more surface area to heat the joint up to keep it nice and hot so it flows. I was able to make it work. And if you have a soldering joint that doesn't look that great, just add a little bit of fresh solder on top, and normally that'll make it flow a lot better. And you see when we got done, add a little bit more fresh solder, you gotta reflow it, and you'll have yourself two nice shiny soldering joints for the positive and the negative lead. Now we can go ahead and do the pads for the motors, and these you want to do like medium-high heat, and get you nice shiny soldering balls on there. Make sure that none of the solder is bridged, touching one another. And these are relatively easy to do. Have a little bit of splatter there, but you can just wipe that off, no big deal. And add a little bit more solder where you see fit. I don't like to see any of the pad left. Okay, taking a look here and adding just a little bit more. Alright, now we got the board put on the frame, and now we can go ahead and get our motor wires stretched out to about where they're going to be, obviously leaving a little bit of slack. And we'll go ahead and cut those, strip those, and go ahead and pre-tin those wires so we can get those ready to get soldered up to this ESC. And I'll show you one of them, and then we'll do all the rest off camera and show you when it's all done. Alright, going to go ahead and strip these wires, and you just need just a little bit of wire. Don't overstrip them. You don't want to run yourself into a short problem. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin the wires. Basically hold the soldering iron underneath the wire and let the wire melt the solder and let the solder wick into the wire is the best way to do it. Then we're going to take our tweezers, line it up straight with the soldering pad, and once you feel it heat up, just let off as soon as it heats up, and it should give you a nice clean joint. You'll kind of feel it sink down through the solder and then just let off, and normally that's good enough. If you have a sketchy looking joint, just try it again, redo it, or add some fresh solder. A lot of times that'll help. Well, there she is, guys, all soldered up and looking nice. Make sure you double check all your solder joints. Make sure there's none of them that float onto one another. Good way to burn up your ESC. But yeah, that's all there is to it. I definitely like soldering up the 4-in-1 ESC versus 4 individual. Definitely a lot easier. Definitely was a lot faster. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll put links down in the description for everything you're seeing in this video if you're curious. And until next time, guys, edrone out.